from Scarecrow Joe's studio. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. And don't forget to subscribe. In this tutorial, we're going to get back to the miniature paper mache coffin house. 2 years later. Yes, approximately 2 years ago I started this tutorial. I was brand new to filming tutorials for YouTube or for anything in general. And many different things happened in the process of filming the fourth segment of the tutorial. So I have parts 1, 2, and 3 that are out there, so you can get started on those right away. Yeah, like I said, a lot of things went wrong in filming the fourth segment. The quality of the video was horrible. The sound wasn't there. You know, just being a rookie, and I am still a rookie at this. You know, I'm still very new to YouTube in general and filming. But I got extremely frustrated and I decided to not continue with the project. But this thing sits on a shelf in my studio here, and so every day that I come in here, I see this thing. And I'm, you know, and lately I'm just like, it's such a cool little project, especially for people who are beginning paper mache artists and they want to try their hand at something other than a jack-o'-lantern or pumpkin sculpture. It's very simple. The steps that I go through are very simple and concrete and easy to follow. So I decided that it's time to pick up where I left off 2 years ago. So that's what we're going to do now. But of course, first things first, I'm going to go over tools and materials that you will need to get through this fourth segment. Tools and materials that you're going to need for this fourth segment, where we're going to finish up the sculpt on our miniature haunted coffin house here. Obviously, you're going to need your coffin house. You're going to need some paper mache clay. This is the clay that we use probably 99% of the time in the studio. Again, we do have a tutorial on how to make the paper mache clay that we use. You're also going to need some paper mache paste. I just use a simple mixture of flour and water to a thin pancake-like batter consistency. If you want to add a little more interest to your piece, I suggest going out and finding some kind of little branch that you could use as a tree. So I have this right here. I'm going to use this as a tree. I'm going to incorporate that into my piece. And then you're going to need some kind of sculpting or smoothing tools. I have some various things here. Doesn't have to be anything fancy or expensive. And then lastly, the way I create my little pumpkins, if you wanted to, again, lend a little bit more interest to your piece and make some little pumpkins or whatnot, I use sculpey clay. This is oven bake sculpey clay. Again, nothing fancy. This is just the original sculpey. And that's how I'm going to make my little pumpkins that I'm going to use to kind of decorate my piece. But other than that, that's going to be it for tools and materials for this segment. So let's get started. We're ready to finish this up here. Let's give this some thought, though. We're going to put a decorative kind of a border around the coffin house and kind of around the windows. And then we're going to sculpt in the door. We're going to sculpt in the little staircase. We're going to create like boulders or rocks and sculpt that in around here. So you got to give this some thought. One of the last or some of the last steps that we're going to do is actually around this area here. So I'm going to go ahead. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start sculpting in my door area. I'm using my window as a guide So I'm not going to cover up, obviously I'm not going to cover up my window. But I'm just going to layer on some clay in there. I'm not going over, as you can see, if I turn it this way, you can see where the clay, or how thick the clay is here on the coffin house. So I'm not building up the door any thicker than that. Just about as thick, but no thicker than that. You want to put it on thick enough so that your window looks like it's recessed in there. So if I turn it that way, hopefully you can see where the window appears to be recessed into the door. Now I'm going to go in with my paper mache paste. Again, just flour and water. And I have just a paintbrush, and I'm going to use that paste to just smooth in a bit my clay. I'm going to take my little sculpting tool, and I'm going to go in and smooth it out even further. Don't worry so much if you're smoothing it in and you're covering up the indentation around here where the door is. We're going to go in and redefine that. I want to make sure that my window stays pretty defined in there as well. So I'm just using my little sculpting tool here for that. Kind of pressing that in. I'm going to go back in with my sculpting tool and redefine the door so that stands out as an actual door. Now, if you want to put like a little indentation or something like that kind of mimics a way to open this door, you could go ahead and just sort of, put like a little notch in there. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put some marks so that it looks like a wooden door. So like wooden planks, basically, with my little sculpting tool. There, that's gonna define it, give it a little bit more interest. That's the thing. We're gonna do things that's gonna just make it look a little bit more interesting. You can also go ahead and take your sculpting tool and you can make little marks into so that it looks more like a sort of a wood grain, just like that, if you wanted to, just to give it some more interest. So that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. Next thing I'm gonna do, I am gonna go in and make little clay what's going to resemble or look like stones, again, to give it some more interest. And I'm going to just attach these. Bigger one's going to be at the top and make my way down. But before I do that, let me take that off of there. Before I do that, I want to go ahead and layer on the clay here on my what's going to be my staircase, or the steps to the door. So I'm just putting on a thin amount of clay evenly on the whole thing. I'm also going to put a thin amount of clay around the sides. Obviously, this is not the coffin house that is shown in the photos for the intros of these videos. That is one that I made a few years ago, and just using that as a reference. So again, just continue. Just make sure you're getting an even amount, thin amount. Doesn't have to be very thick at all. Covering up the cardboard on your stairs here, or what will be your stairs. Make sure on your edges where you've glued your cardboard pieces together that you are getting clay on there, because if you don't, when you go to paint, it's going to look like cardboard, and you don't want it to look like cardboard. All right, so I've got that on there. Once again, with my paintbrush and paste, I'm just going to go in and add a little paste and put a little pressure using my paintbrush to just smooth it out, help smooth that out a bit. I see right there, I didn't get enough clay on there. So now I do have enough clay on there. Right, and then once again, I'm going to go in and smooth. You don't have to get crazy smooth, because we're going to, again, do some texturing to make this more interesting. But the reason that I do this is because it helps me ensure that I have an even amount of clay on the surface area of where I'm working. All right, let's go ahead and start building this up and making them look like stairs. So I'm taking bits of my clay here, and I'm layering it on top of the clay, the thin amount of clay that I just put on there. Again, it does not have to be like completely even. It is a haunted coffin house, so it doesn't need to be completely even on here. Want to make it, if you want to make it look old and kind of run down, you can totally go ahead and do that. So as you could see, well, hopefully you could see, turn it this way. It doesn't really look like much. Turn it this way, it kind of looks, it's starting to take shape where it's starting to look like stone. Well, it will look like stone steps. That's the goal here, to make it look like stone steps. One more here. Like that. And then I'm going to go down here. Alright, and now I have this thinner paintbrush here. I'm going to use this again with my my paste here. I'm going to go in and apply some of my paper mache paste. Kind of smooth out the surface a little bit. We don't need to get too crazy on this and smoothing it out completely because we do want it to have that texture in there. But I'm just sort of using my paintbrush to kind of define where the steps would be. The really cool thing about this paper mache clay, using the cellulose fiber insulation, is it's great for stuff like this. You can make things look like wood. You can make things look like steps or concrete or rocks. It's really great for giving that illusion. All right, so I kind of, if you want to separate your steps, you can go ahead and separate them by using, you know, using again your using a sculpting tool like this. Toothpicks work really well. Butter knives, plastic butter knives, like fast food type butter knives. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and I want to redefine because I kind of smashed it down a little bit just in the center, and I just want to go in and redefine it a little bit using my my little sculpting tool here. Take a look at it from the side here. All right, next thing that I want to do is I'm going to take bits of my clay here and I'm just going to create little round, like maybe some boulders, some rocks. If you wanted that on the side, and you could do a bunch of different shapes if you wanted, different sizes. Again, just to lend it a little bit more interest. So I'm going to continue doing that. I'm going to do it on this side all the way down and on the other side. All right, so I created my little boulders or stones along the sides here. Again, I'm going to take my small paintbrush and my paste, and this is not so much to smooth it, but what I want to do is make sure I'm getting some paste in between where they've kind of connected to each other, because I didn't press them in because I wanted them to retain their shape. So by doing this and adding a little of the paste around them, it will ensure that these things dry and stick to the existing clay that was already on there, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. It's acting like a glue, basically. It's just making sure that it's going to adhere to the clay that I had already layered on there, that thin layer of clay. All right. So there you have it. That's that for the staircase. All right, next step here, I'm going to put some decorative stones around the door, the arch of this door here. I'm going to start with my my middle stone. Now obviously the clay underneath here, this is dry, whereas this was not dry. But this wet clay will still stick to this dry clay. So I'm going to go ahead again and just kind of make my way around the door frame with these decorative, or what will look like stones. They don't have to be completely uniform. In fact, I think it's more interesting if they're not completely uniform. Got my stones around my doorway there again. Paste, small brush, just kind of in between them. I want to make sure that they are going to adhere. So around them, in between them a bit. I want to make sure by doing this, I will ensure that they will adhere to that dry clay that I applied this on top of. There we go. Starting to take shape here. Starting to look like a haunted miniature coffin house. All right, let's work on framing out our windows. Again, I'm going to take little bits of my clay here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of make a sort of make a snake or a coil with my clay, and right on that dry clay I'm going to go ahead and attach and build up a border around both of my windows so they kind of have like a little bit of a window frame going on. Again, doesn't have to be uniform or perfect. In fact, I think it's better if they are not uniform or perfect. All right, so I have framed out my my little windows here. Once again, to ensure that my wet clay will adhere to that dry clay that I've applied that window frame to. I'm just going to go in with my small paintbrush and my paste. Just around there. All right, so at this point, all of the inner stuff right now is pretty much complete. Next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and put my border around the actual coffin house itself. And I'm going to accomplish that the same way, using the same technique, the same way that I did framing out the windows. Take some clay, coil it up, and depending on how thick you want it, I mean, you can make it thick, you can make it thin, whatever you want. I'm just going to kind of go with eyeballing it here. And I'm going to frame out the whole thing. Now you can see what I've done here. I'm just going to frame out the whole thing. Again, basically just using the coiled clay technique. I'm going to go all the way around. I'm going to go all the way around on the back side of it as well. All right, so I went ahead and I did my little border. On both sides, front and back. And then once again, I'm going to use my smaller paintbrush here and my paste. And I want to make sure I get some paste along the edges. To ensure, once again, that my wet clay is going to adhere to that dry clay. The other areas that you might want to pay attention to is where your coils kind of overlapped and meet. Maybe blend that in a little bit. I'm not so worried about it, again, because I want this to look like a haunted coffin house. I don't want it to look too clean. So I'm going to continue on and do the front side as well. All right, we are nearly done here with our clay work. Next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to layer on a thin layer of clay all the way around the edge of my base. And then I'm going to go ahead and smooth it out once again using my paste and a paintbrush. I don't have to worry so much about getting it completely smooth. I just want to cover it. This is masking tape. Paper mache clay will adhere really well to masking tape. It will not adhere to anything that has a gloss to it. So don't use packing tape or anything like that. Again, go back to the construction phase in section 1. You'll see what I mean and why I used masking tape. So that's what I'm going to do next. Go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to come back and we're going to create some boulders to attach around the base over that thin layer of clay. So that's next. Alright guys, so as you can see, I have applied my thin layer of clay all the way around the outside border of my base here. It looks rough, and that's fine. Because you're not really going to see much of that at all, and I really wanted it to kind of blend in because I did not smooth this top layer of clay. I just let it dry. Doesn't make any difference because this is going to be covered up with paint and some other things. What I did concentrate on is the edges here. I did take and make sure that those were blended in a little bit so it didn't look like there's, you know, an obvious stop and start point. So moving on, I'm gonna go ahead and get some of my clay. I'm gonna make balls of clay here, and this is where you need to be very careful. You don't want to put your hand on things that you've already created. So be very careful, because when you put these boulders on here, you do need to press them in a bit, because this clay is wet. It's wet on wet clay. It's going to stick pretty good, but you're still going to need to press it in a bit. So go ahead, make different sizes of your boulders if you want them to stick out a little bit up on top, sort of like that. Go ahead and do that. And just go ahead and do that over the entire border of your base here. To me, I don't know, this just makes it look a little bit more interesting to me, instead of just having that flat border. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to continue on and building up some rocks or some boulders around the edge of my base. One thing that I do want to mention before I carry on is at the bottom of this, I'm going to gently... The bottom of this is still raw cardboard. I did not clay that over. You don't have to clay that over if you don't want to take the time to do that. You don't have to at all, really. But if you want to, after this is completely dry, you could go in and take a thin layer of clay and clay over the bottom of that. It will protect, that raw cardboard from any kind of moisture or anything like that. Most of the time, people who are displaying miniatures, they're indoors, so you really don't have to worry about any kind of weather or anything like that. But, that's completely up to you, again, if you wanted to do that. The other thing is, you've probably noticed that I have my sculpture here on a surface, a wheel. This is an artist's wheel, painter's wheel. They come in great. They come in really handy. They're great to use. I use them often, not just for painting on, but sculpting, so I don't have to, turn this while it's sitting on a table and pick it up and maneuver it. I could just put it in one position. You can also use a Lazy Susan. Pick one up at, maybe look for an older one. It doesn't have to be anything brand new, obviously, if you're using it for art. It's going to get dirty and messed up and painted on and that kind of thing. But thrift stores, look in thrift stores or, something like that. And you could pick them up pretty cheap. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to continue on and applying my rocks or my boulders. And then we'll come back to it. All right, so I took the time. I created my boulders here. I put them all the way around the perimeter of my base. As you can see, they're rough looking, but that's fine. I want them to be rough looking. And then once again, I'm going to go in with my paste. I'm going to go around, make sure that these have paste in between them, underneath, just along where they've attached. Now I have attached these to wet clay as a separate element. Now if you had walked away, you did your thin layer of clay around the perimeter of your base, and then you had to stop for any reason, and those areas that with that thin layer of clay happen to dry, it's completely fine. But what I suggest is that before you create and attach your little boulders, is that you take your paste and you just put a layer of paste all the way around, and then stick your boulders onto that. It's going to help them adhere better to dry clay. So that's just a little tip there. If you happen to walk away, you couldn't finish this section of it here, completely fine. It doesn't matter. It will still work. Paper mache will wait for you. You can come back even years later, like I did with this initial piece here. Sat on my shelf for a couple of years at least. And, you know, picked up where I left off. No problem. Okay, so what I ended up doing is I put this in front of a fan and I allowed it to dry overnight. So about, I don't know, 12 hours or so. It's still very tacky. I mean, it's not like goopy wet like it was before. The reason I did that is because when I was trying to maneuver it, because I had some of the clay that was on the bottom there, it started sticking to my surface. And every time I tried to pull it up, a lot of my boulders here, the work that I did on my boulders, they started to stick to the surface and pull away. So I put it in front of a fan and I let it dry so I can maneuver it. So as you can see, I can pick it up now. They're not falling off. So I suggest that you do that. Just let it dry overnight. Put it in front of a fan. We're going to go on to the final step, or my final step. I mean, you could do as much work, put in as much details or as many details and little things that you want to completely, you know, make this your own. But my final step is to attach my little tree here. So one of the things that I left out in the tools and materials section of this video was a hot glue gun and hot glue sticks, because initially I'm going to attach this with a little bit of hot glue. Now this surface area where I'm attaching it to is completely dry. So you do want to make sure that your surface area is completely dry. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to let that sit for, I don't know, 30 seconds or so. Let that cool. This is not going to be the only thing that's going to be holding this little tree here in place. I'm going to put some clay around that, and that will hold it in there permanently. Another thing that you can do before you attach your tree, if you're going to attach a tree, is on the surface of your tree, you can take your paper mache clay, and you can sculpt in, layer on some clay wherever you want, and sculpt in more like burls or different things like that. You can sculpt in a face, and the paper mache clay will adhere and stick very well to wood, because of course it's made from paper fibers. Alright, so I'm going to just take some of my paper mache clay, and I'm going to put some paper mache clay around my little tree here. And once that dries, it will harden and permanently hold that tree in place very, very well. A couple other things that you can do to make this more interesting is you can give it some roots. So using again the coiled clay effect, you could totally just give this some roots, you know. Now what I intend to do with mine is I'm going to eventually put some like maybe some wood mulch, you know, pieces of wood mulch, some moss. To show you what I mean, I have some pieces of I've got some moss. This is moss that I kind of gathered from trees around my house. I live in a forested area in Lake Tahoe, so I kind of harvested this stuff off. So once it's painted, I'm going to paint the base first, of course, like a brownish color or whatever. And then strategic places, I'll tear this moss apart and I'll stick it on there. I also have some pieces of, this is like mulch or bark, pieces like that. You can buy things like this from craft stores, moss, that kind of thing. But that's going to be layered on and put on this. That's my intention. That's what I'm going to do with mine. You don't have to do that with yours. But if you are going to do that, start gathering those materials now, so that you have them ready to go when the time comes. So I'm just adding some roots. Few here, few there, just to make it a little bit more interesting. You can even add some of these things to your tree or your to your tree, kind of make it more interesting, bulk it up in certain areas. This little branch that I have, it's pretty cool. I like the way it looks, so I'm not real worried about adding a whole lot to it, but you certainly can. So once again, I'm going to go in. I'll take my little brush with my paper mache paste, and I'm going to smooth this in here, because this clay on the bottom again is dry, so I really want to make sure that I'm getting some paste around and I'm also want to make sure that it's blended in. So what I've applied to the actual little tree here, just sort of blending it into that tree. Root that I have right here is kind of growing over one of the boulders, so that's kind of cool. Have fun with it. Use your creativity. Make it your own. Doesn't have to look exactly like this. Make it more interesting to look at. It's going to look really cool once it's done and painted. All right, so that's basically the final detail of layering on our clay and doing our sculpt. One thing that I did want to point out, I don't know if you could see it, but right in here, where that wet clay kind of separated from itself, if you don't like the way that looks, you can go in, take small amounts of clay and cover that up, but I'm not going to. I like the way it looks. I'm going to leave it as is and let it dry like that, because it's going to bring out some more texture. So yeah, done with this. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create using my polymer clay, the oven baked sculpey clay. I'm going to make some little pumpkins. You can also, you can create all kinds of different things with the polymer clay to use as decorations and whatnot for your coffin. So that's what I'm going to do next. All right, so what I have in front of me here is a cookie baking sheet, and this is a piece of parchment paper. You can also use wax paper, or you don't have to use any paper at all. You can use your cookie sheet, but I like to use some parchment paper. And then this is my original Sculpey oven baked clay. I got a good chunk of it here, and I'm gonna go in and just start rolling some pumpkins. You can make them, whatever kind of size you want, whatever kind of shape you want. For the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just going to do some basic little round guys. So, you know, just roll a ball of it. To create a stem, it's very simple. I just pinch the top, just like this. And you can bend it over like that. And there you go. You have your basic pumpkin shape. If you wanted to draw in and make them jack-o'-lanterns, I'm kind of smashing it down a little bit so that I know it will have a bit of a flat bottom, just like that. You could draw in or sculpt in, press in little jack-o'-lantern eyes. A toothpick is great for this as well. So this is basically a little pumpkin guy. I'm going to move this out of the way for just a second and move my coffin house up a bit. Use your coffin house as a reference on how big you want your pumpkins, where you might want to sit your pumpkins, strategically place them. The other thing that you could do is you can create a little cemetery in certain areas and make your own like tombstones. But you can make the basic shapes of tombstones. This is just a very, obviously, very basic shape of a tombstone. And with your toothpick, or any kind of other sculpting tool, you know, you could write rest in peace, you know, RIP, whatever. If you want to get really intricate, you could put names in there. So yeah, that's totally something that you could do. You can make your little graveyard. You can make, you know, let's add some cracks and stuff to our little tombstone. Use your imagination again. One other thing that you could do when creating your little polymer clay pumpkins is if you want a like a twisted kind of a twisted stem on any of them. That's really simple to do. Again, ball shape, pinch, and then take it and basically just you're twisting, just like that. You can press in the pumpkin kind of form. You know how they have the ridge lines, something like that. And then from there you could go ahead. I just have another little sculpting tool. Make them different shapes. Make them more interesting with some different shapes. And then press in your little jack-o'-lantern. So something like that. So I've got a few different ones here, different sizes. I have one. I'm probably going to make another one that doesn't have a face on it. This is just a basic little pumpkin. Got that one. And then this one. So I think I'm going to do one more that does not have a face on it. Yeah, I'm going to just put them in the oven to bake according to the instructions on your sculpey package. If you're using the sculpey clay for this, or for your tombstones or whatever else that you might be using to create some little separate elements to place on your coffin house. Let's see here with the amount of pumpkins I have. Let's say something like that. Probably put another one in there somewhere. All right, guys, that's a wrap for part 4 of our paper mache haunted coffin house tutorial. We finished up the sculpt. We created some little separate elements here. These are not attached yet, my little jack-o'-lanterns. Make sure you put this in front of a fan to dry or out in bright, warm sunlight. Don't just let it out, you know, to dry on its own. And you definitely want it to dry, be completely and thoroughly dried before we go into the next segment, the final segment, and painting and attaching all of our separate elements here. So on that note, thank you for watching, and if you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing, and we'll catch you in the next one.